This movie solidified my one wish to have Jean-Claude Van Damme narrate my inner thoughts one day. Darkness of Man, scheduled to be released on video on demand on May 21st, and is directed by James Cullen Bressek, who's also directed such films like Hate Crime, To Jennifer, Beyond the Law, and The Fortress. And this film is starring, of course, the big name and probably the biggest thing coming out of this movie, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Christina Loken, Emerson Min, Spencer Breslin, Sticky Fingers, and Shannon Doherty. And the reason why we're covering Darkness of Man today early before its release on video on demand is because, well, this is a screener that I received. It's been a while since I've received a screener, but the publicist behind this film, Saban Productions, reached out to me saying, hey, think that this would be a pretty good film for you to review, and I'm so thankful for them. Finding out that this was a Saban production actually made me very happy. I grew up watching Power Rangers like crazy, so to know that I have been reached out to from them, the company that kind of created me and created my childhood and the things that I enjoyed, it's kind of cool to think about. So thank you very much for the early access. I definitely appreciate it, and I'm actually very happy that you sent it over because, to my shock, this is actually a pretty enjoyable film. Russell Hatch is an Interpol operative who is acting as the driver and the father figure in a young boy's life named Jaden, whose mother was a close informant to Russell and was killed in a raid gone wrong. Well, here Russell is a couple of years later, and he's finding himself pulled back in between a power struggle between the Korean and Russian mob. And though Russell tries to desperately fight against getting pulled back into the fray of things, he starts asking questions and starts kicking some ass. Now, Jean-Claude Van Damme is one of those action stars that I've seen a couple things of theirs, but I haven't seen their entire catalog. I'm not a Jean-Claude Van Damme guy. I'm definitely more of a Stallone guy, a Schwarzenegger guy. Van Damme was always someone that I think my dad would watch all the time, and I would occasionally catch if I was walking past the TV at a certain day, probably on a Sunday or a Saturday. But I've really only known Jean-Claude Van Damme in his older years, and he is in his 60s, but he's still kicking ass. And in this film, he kicks a lot of ass, but he also has a solid and very emotional performance. He's this ex-operative who is this alcoholic who is constantly drinking, and that's the only way he can get through his life. But as he finds himself kind of thrown into the midst of this Korean and Russian mob tussle, you start to hear the narration and the inner thoughts of this Russell character. And the narration at first, it threw me off because I felt like it was going to overstay its welcome. At first, he's narrating it as if he's writing in a journal, and everything is poetic and everything is philosophical and everything is long, drawn out. But then all of a sudden it gets to these short little clips of him thinking, oh, I need to wait for my moment. And it continues with that trope. And at first, like I said, I didn't think I was going to like it, but I actually ended up really enjoying it. It's the aspect of this movie that I love the most, to the point where I want Jean-Claude Van Damme to be my inner voice whenever I have my inner thoughts of things that I'm thinking about throughout the day. The bass, the graveliness, the accent that he has, it all just works, and it works for this noir setting that this film is going for. Jean-Claude Van Damme is definitely the best part of this film, which of course is just shame on me, because I thought he was just going to be another kind of muscle head dude from the 80s who is now in his 60s and is getting this role of this old timer who used to kick ass and kind of still does type movie role thing. So shame on me for thinking that, because he is actually quite good in this film. The other performance that caught my eye and made me very happy just to see him here, because he's such an adorable old man, and the second that you see him on screen, I emotionally attach to him because he is the lover from the movie The Valet, which I absolutely loved, and I loved him in it. Ji-Young Lee is here, and he is this old timer who owns this small little grocery store, and he's the one that's being terrorized by these people coming in, and that's when Jean-Claude Van Damme sees it all, and he's like, oh, I'll intervene because he's a nice old man. He just has that nice old manness about him. I love whenever he's on screen. I want to see more stuff with him. Or is he so nice? You have to check out the movie to see. Unfortunately, all the other performances aside from these two felt like they were trying extremely hard. Like, they had their lines memorized and they were putting a lot of emotion and a lot of action and a lot of big decisions behind their delivery and their blocking and their physicality. To the point where I feel the director should have reined it in a little bit and made it just a little bit more subdued and made the delivery a little bit more simple with the actors. That way it could have been a little bit more believable to me. These side characters really didn't have range. Whenever they popped out on screen, they were really like already up here, and the energy and the emotion was already so big and so high that they didn't have anywhere else to go. There's gotta be dips and valleys in there, brah. And I will say there were some moments in the score in certain fight scenes that sounded like it was slightly plagiarizing the Batman film score from Michael Giacchino. You had the same rhythms, you had the same beat, maybe the intervals between notes was slightly different, but for a guy that has listened to the Batman soundtrack so many times, just hearing that dun 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 dun. If you go back and watch a couple of the fight scenes, you have that same dun 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 dun. Different notes, but same rhythm and the same energy. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying it's plagiarized, I'm just saying there are similarities. And as I'm continuing with things that kind of took me out of it, there were a couple of CGI shots when it came to the gunshots people being shot in the head. There wasn't a lot of reaction, like physical reaction from the actors. Sometimes you'll see the CGI bullet go into their head, and then they just go, I feel like there would have been some type of ricochet in the head if they were getting shot like that. But this is a smaller budget, smaller films, so those pieces of CGI and visual effects I'm very forgiving of. It doesn't take me out of it as some of the performance kind of did. But for it being a smaller independent feature, I gotta say I do love the cinematography and the lighting choices in here. It made it feel very noir, like this is a detective story. Kind of a makeshift detective story, but still a classic detective piece. A lot of fun uses of shadows, and the use of rain, and the use of just the overhead, like, street lights shining down. There is a fight scene in here that you see from the backseat of a car looking out of the front window, which actually I thought that was very innovative. Never seen that before. So kudos to the cinematographer and the director for coming up with those shots. I think they were very innovative. Darkness of Man is actually a solid, small-budget, independent noir story that I was actually very intrigued of, which really surprised me. Sometimes when I get these screeners of these smaller, independent, low-budget films, I'm left desiring a lot more, but with this one, no, I was actually digging this the majority of the time, mainly because Jean-Claude Van Damme gives a pretty stellar performance. I would definitely recommend checking this out on any streaming service that does carry it. I think it's going to be worth your time. I'm going to give Darkness of Man 3.5 out of 5 Blu-rays.
I am above average.
So guys, if you've seen Darkness of Man, what did you think about it? Or if you've never seen it before and you stumbled across it because of this video, then comment below and let me know what you thought about it. And as always, if you like what you see here, if you like my take on movies, then hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell. See you the next time I release next movie review. So guys, I will see you next time on the channel, but in the meantime, be well, be good to each other, and go watch a movie. Take care, guys.